What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. Here it is Monday, October 31st, 2016. Happy Halloween. Ooh, time for the annual extortion racket by the neighborhood children. And we're all set to go tonight. We got these little bags of veggie chips to hand out. We've got about 6 of them, and I figure that's all we need because after the first kids get the veggie chips, they're going to Twitter all over the neighborhood, oh, the Riveros don't have anything good, and they'll leave us alone for the rest of the night. I did get my... Oh, we just lost our connection to RBN. All right, there we are. We're back on the air here. The gremlins are out there already trying to shut us down and everything, and we'll get on to that in just a little tiny minute. I did get my treat, though. I did order my own Donald Trump dollar. For those of you watching on BAM User TV, there it is. And I figure it'll keep my Ron Paul dollar company down there in the mayonnaise jar buried out by the pineapple plantation. So we were talking about Halloween, and we were talking about the bad people are in a little bit of a panic, and that is certainly true right now because of developments that started happening last Friday. And what's going on is that FBI Director Comey announced he was reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email and whether State Department emails were being mishandled. Now, there is ample reason. We're not talking about somebody finding a flash drive with a couple of emails on it. This latest bombshell in the case came from a completely separate investigation into Anthony Weiner, who, despite all of his previous scandals, is apparently still in the habit of entertaining, I guess would be a polite word for it, underage young girls over the internet on his various devices, and he's under investigation for that on a couple of different levels. And so apparently they were looking at this laptop that Anthony Weiner was using to conduct his little online sessions with, and they uncovered 650,000 State Department emails. That's an awful lot. It's kind of hard to ignore that. And this was brought to FBI Director Comey. He took it to Loretta Lynch. Loretta Lynch said, no, don't mention it. We're not going to do anything like that. But Comey was kind of, unfortunately, as I understand it, put in a very awkward place. First of all, the FBI rank and file are still angry with him for pandering to Hillary Clinton's campaign over the Title 18 violations. And they're very angry. Apparently, there's been a huge rash of resignations of high-level FBI people who are just saying they don't want to be tarnished by all this. Apparently, Comey's wife was apparently on his case. But I think what was the final deciding factor is that state authorities had the laptop and its contents and copies thereof, and they were getting ready to go public. And had they gone public with this, and Comey was known to have had this information and done nothing, he would be in a world of hurt. I mean, he's in a world of hurt anyway. At this point, it doesn't matter what he does. He's going to be barbecued in hog fat by one side or the other. So welcome to real-world politics there, Mr. Comey. So apparently one of the things that caught people's eye was the top directory holding all these 650,000 State Department emails was labeled life insurance, which, knowing the Clintons, makes perfect sense. And this is turning out to be a huge October surprise. Everybody thought that locker room tape from Donald Trump was the October surprise. That was going to be it. That was going to change the election. No, at this point, that's pretty much gone. Now, it looks like, and first of all, you need to understand, it is already documented and known that Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner shared this laptop prior to their estrangement. So Huma was on this laptop. She's trying to claim she had nothing to do with it now, but it's already known she was using that, and apparently she was backing up all of the State Department emails on her laptop. This represents an illegal copying of these documents, especially any that are classified. More Title 18 violations. But the news is out now. The Department of Justice was trying to block the FBI from getting a warrant to examine the emails, but once word came out that other law enforcement agencies have their own copies, They had to go and let the FBI take a search, and the FBI is now scanning the emails on Huma Abedin's laptop. And this is going to be a major, major breakthrough, because remember, when Hillary Clinton turned over her State Department emails to congressional investigators, she printed them out on paper and took them over as hard copies so that nobody could run a computerized search on them. You had to have people just reading the emails after emails after emails. It was impossible to do any electronic correlation or searching. That was intentional, to obfuscate the situation. Now they have all of these emails on a hard drive. They can use software tools to go looking through them very, very rapidly. We're going to take a moment to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. We're talking about Hillary Clinton. She may not have felt the burn, but she's definitely feeling the wiener, because this laptop that surfaced last week with these 650,000 emails has forced the FBI to reopen the investigation into Hillary's handling of the email. And at this point, with a week to go before the election, what is actually in the emails doesn't matter. Politics is perception, and the perception is this is just one more indicator that there's some kind of a massive cover-up going on with all of this stuff. And so now they've got these emails in searchable forms. Now, 650,000 emails suggest that Huma was doing regular backups from the State Department. And there are probably going to be a lot of duplicates in there. But because they're in machine-readable form, the duplicates can be filtered out and they can get down to the nitty-gritty. And the FBI is now pouring through that laptop, and they're looking for actionable material. Loretta Lynch is saying it's a violation of the Hatch Act to release anything before Election Day. So is Harry Reid. No, it isn't, in fact. The Hatch Act is if you use your political office in a campaign, like Obama's been doing with Air Force One in the White House, that's a violation of the Hatch Act. It's not, according to constitutional scholars, a violation of the Hatch Act to arrest a criminal for a crime, even if that criminal is running for public office. Because until they win that public office, they are private citizens and as subject to the law as anybody else. Now, Huma Abedin is lawyering up. The situation is going from bad to worse. She's trying to plead innocent, saying that she had nothing to do with this laptop, and yet nobody can explain how a laptop only held by Anthony would ever get this material. So somebody's lying somewhere. And by the way, this going along by getting along, or getting along by going along, anytime you work for a large organization where some of the people are behaving badly, and you always get that little elbow in the rib saying, you get along by going along, just close your eyes and let them do what they're going to do. Apparently Hillary Clinton's inner circle knew that Anthony Weiner had this fetish for online sex with underage girls 5 years ago and did nothing about it, and today they are paying the price. So what we're doing right now is we're seeing a three-way contest between Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin, and Anthony Weiner as to who's going to get thrown under the bus. And with the salacious behavior, I would say probably that ultimately Anthony Weiner is going to wind up with tread marks on the face. But it may not just be him. Now, apparently when news broke about this laptop in the FBI, it did come as an unexpected shock to the Hillary Clinton campaign. And there's actually a photograph of Huma Abedin breaking down and crying on the campaign plane. And the look in Hillary's eyes is absolute white-hot flaming death. And I find myself incapable of sympathy. These people knew what they were doing. They thought they could get away with it. So far they have, but now they're caught and it's out there in the public. Now, Hillary Clinton has just made what I think may be the worst strategic decision she could. She is now referring to Huma Abedin as just one of her staffers and kicked her off the campaign plane in Florida. Huma had to get a regular flight to get back home. I think that was one of the worst things Hillary could have done. First of all, because it makes it look like Hillary's trying to distance herself from this, which is impossible. Those are her emails. And let us not forget that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Now, we've all been hearing stories about how Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton have been lovers going back to when Huma was just 19 years old. And who cares? But if it's true, Hillary's just made a mistake. This isn't a staffer she's kicked off the plane and humiliated. It's her lover. Now, like attracts like, and I have no doubt Huma is a close match to Hillary herself in terms of vindictiveness, getting tossed from the plane and publicly humiliated and potentially being under the bus. This will be the end of Huma's loyalty and objectivity, and she's going to flip the other way. Hillary could not have done anything more to flip Huma Abedin into being a cooperating witness for potential prosecution, unless, of course, Huma gets really depressed in Fort Marcy Park. And there's already a Twitter channel out there. You know, save Huma. We all know what's coming. Now, the last we heard is after trying to say, oh, I had nothing to do with Anthony Weiner's laptop, Huma is now seeking an immunity deal. This is getting serious. Even The Guardian in Great Britain is saying Hillary Clinton's closest ally just became her biggest liability. So this is getting dynamic. More trouble for Camp Hillary. Anthony Weiner is now cooperating with the FBI investigation. He doesn't want to get framed for this. He didn't do anything wrong, really. I mean, unless he looked at the classified emails. But if he was sharing the laptop with Huma and Huma was copying off the emails and Anthony was just going on out looking for underage girls, then he's off scot-free and he does not want to get framed for this. Now, Huma Abedin testified under oath that she turned over all devices that had contained State Department emails. She's looking at a perjury charge and a 5-year prison sentence. Hillary Clinton is looking at a charge of obstruction of justice that carries a 20-year prison sentence. All right, we're going to take a phone call from George in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Well, you know, the thing is, I work for a major retailer, and one thing I noticed, because a lot of poll watchers are getting them, and that is the dash cameras that hook right onto your car, and they're going to be watching the polling places, and there's people linking up on polling places, looking for vans and cars, trying to find people who are voting more than one time.
Well, it's good that they're doing that.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's more like we already got a confirmation from the police that people watching the polls looking for people voting more than once does not violate the Ku Klux Klan Act.
Well, it's funny you should say that because literally, I think it was about a week and a half ago, Loretta Lynch's Department of Justice came on out with a statement that any attempts by citizens to stop vote fraud represented a violation of the Voting Rights Act. Now, that's complete and utter nonsense, but that's how scared Loretta Lynch is, because if Hillary goes down, Loretta's going to go down with her.
I just really think no matter what the voter fraud, no matter how much fraud they try to throw on, I think Donald Trump's going to steamroll over, not landslide. I'm talking a steamroll.
I sure hope to see it. I sure hope to see it. It's hard to get a read because the corporate media, last Friday it looked like the corporate media was going to bail on Hillary. Today, apparently over the weekend, phone calls went on out reminding, you know, you work for us, you do what we tell you, and they're back out there today saying Hillary is 167 percentage points ahead of Donald Trump. And yes, her unfavorability ratings have hit a new high, but she's still ahead of Trump because Trump made the illegal immigrants feel bad.
You know, the thing is, what's kind of funny, it's more like hearing Madonna and Miley Cyrus campaigning for Hillary. You know, if I was Hillary Clinton, that's like having gonorrhea and syphilis endorsing me, you know.
Especially when it was juxtaposed with their attacks on Donald Trump, you know, as attention seeker and groping women, and you have these rock stars who grab their own crotch on stage in virtually every show. You know, we all remember the wrecking ball with Miley Cyrus, and boy, talk about softcore porn. Now, even without the wrecking ball, what she was doing with the sledgehammer, and you just sit there and say, "Wow, man, we didn't have rock music videos like that when I was a kid."
No, I remember my mom told me that my grandmother would not let my mom watch Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show. And you look at Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show, it is mild in comparison to what's going on today.
Well, your grandmother would have been okay because when Elvis did the Ed Sullivan Show, they literally blocked out the lower third of the screen so you wouldn't see his hips gyrating around. But you're right, compared to what it passes for normal music today, it's very, very tame. And it's all entertainment. I mean, I'm not a prude. I mean, but this idea that, you know, anything is allowable until you're able to use it as a vector to attack your enemy. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
But anyway, but you know, the thing is, this Tuesday I'll be out doing exit polling. I'm just going to do a simple paper. I'm already printing up paper ballots, and I'm just going to put them in a box with a lock on it. And that's how I'm going to do my exit polling.
All right.
And I'm going to have it all videotape counted.
All right. I'll be interested in your results versus the official results for that same precinct. So thanks an awful lot. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the lines until I can get ahead of some of these talking points. Alex in Florida, what's on your mind? Alex, are you there?
Yes. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Okay. Oh, what a tangled web we weave once we start out to deceive.
Yes.
The truth, hopefully, is going to come through. But I have a question for you. Are you sure that the 650,000 emails are actually State Department emails, or are they mixed in with her Wiener's emails? I mean, are they?
No, they're deemed to be germane to the FBI's investigation of Hillary Clinton's emails at the State Department. They were not in a regular email file. They were not like in the actual email. These were archived copies of State Department emails. They were in a directory labeled life insurance.
They're in trouble. I'm just afraid that for some reason the evils of this world in this country, I think she could still get in, even though I think she's probably losing by a landslide. They're rigging the election right now.
Well, if they want to risk an armed rebellion by the American people, I mean, they can keep on doing it. But just because the corporate media tells us Hillary's our next president doesn't mean we have to listen to her if we know that she stole that office. Nobody is under obligation to obey a president or, for that matter, a member of Congress, a mayor, a governor, the dog catcher, if fraud was involved in their election to office. They're not legitimate. We are under no obligation to listen to them, to obey their orders, to fill out the forms, to put on the stickers, certainly not to pay their bills, and most definitely not to sacrifice life and limb of our children in these endless wars of conquest.
Yeah. I think what she could have done is charged her phone using the computer, the USB with the computer, and it automatically transfers the files. Weiner probably did the same thing. And
no, wait a minute, you're guessing. You're guessing at this point. You're guessing at this point. Okay. All right. Because okay. I'll give you one example. When I plug in my iPhone, first of all, it's not automatic. I have to hit a button saying synchronize. Okay, and it doesn't synchronize my emails because I don't need to. My emails come into both machines. And second, iTunes shoves the emails into a very specific folder that is not labeled life insurance. These are backup files. They're not active email files. They're backup files. Okay? Somebody deliberately copied these. That's a violation of Title 18. All right, Alex, we're going to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, the Clinton campaign is in a total panic. They're out there in full attack mode. They're out there already flooding the blogs and the talk radio shows saying, oh, it was probably just an accident. It was just a mistake. It was an imminent. You need to remember, Title 18, Section 793, exposure of U.S. national secrets through negligence is punishable by 10 years in prison and banning from holding all public office. Bad intent is not required. Those emails are never supposed to be anywhere where they could be copied deliberately or unintentionally onto any other device. Some of the material that was found in Hillary's private email server was special access compartmentalized material, which is normally stored on a computer network that does not connect to the regular internet. It's an isolated net. The whole system is air-gapped. For information that is on that private little network, to get onto Hillary Clinton's private email server means somebody put it on a flash drive and walked it out of there and copied it onto an outside machine. And that shows intent right there. So James Comey has got to be feeling very abused right now. I mean, he put his career, his reputation on the line trying to protect Hillary Clinton. We all remember last summer how he got up there and said, well, yes, she committed all these Title 18 felony violations, but you know, we don't think she meant to do wrong, and no reasonable prosecutor who doesn't want to die under suspicious circumstances would bother bringing a case, so we're going to let her go. Well, now he's been forced to reopen the case by the sheer volume of emails that were found by these sex investigators looking into Anthony Weiner's wiener. And he was under pressure from his own agents. And now that he's actually out there starting to do the job he should have been doing all along. Of course, those people he protected, Hillary's campaign, they've turned on him. They have just turned on him. How much sharper than a serpent's tooth to have a thankless child. And I'm sure right now Comey is thinking, why did he bother? All this loyalty to the Hillary machine, and the instant things go wrong, they just turn on him. But there is that issue about Hillary's emails, and they matter because of what was in there and where they went. And part of the concern that is growing now and may explode into the limelight is Huma Abedin's family ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. And a lot of people are wondering, was Huma spying for Saudi Arabia? And is that why she had all of the State Department emails on this laptop? We don't know. We need to find out. But behind all of this, the mere presence of these emails on that laptop shows that all of Hillary Clinton's emails and State Department business were being illegally copied outside of the secure server area. So we need to keep that in mind. Another Hillary Clinton IT staffer, John Bentel, has now taken the fifth. Really? I thought it was just an innocent little private email server. And all these people are taking the fifth. By the way, has anyone seen Brian Pagliani lately? We put his face on a milk carton last week, still no word here. Now, polls are out there, and Hillary's campaign and those parts of the media still with her are saying, this isn't changing the voters' minds. We just polled a bunch of voters, and this recent revelation about more emails is not changing their vote. What they're not telling you is they're polling people who are already voting for Donald Trump anyway. But 45% of people polled from over at PatriotRising.com. This scandal is worse than Watergate. 61% of Americans think this is going to drag into the White House if Hillary wins. We're going to have to go through that whole Watergate Richard Nixon thing all over again if Hillary steals this election. I don't think we need to go through that. I think if Donald Trump gets that White House, and then the FBI does their thing, the guilty go off to prison, and the country gets headed in a better direction. Do we really need to go through another criminal presidency? I say no. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I know it must be an important day for the American election system because Hillary's tantrum squad is all over my server. It's been nonstop all morning long. And so we're still fending them off. But basically, the more they're pounding on the site, it tells everybody we're really getting close to the truth here. Now, getting on back to the situation with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon stole his reelection. We all know that now. And in point of fact, the American people weren't stupid enough to elect a president that was under investigation for election fraud and a bunch of other stuff. It didn't actually happen that way. Richard Nixon stole that second election. Hillary Clinton got a good close-up look at how he did it. She was on the Watergate committee and then got fired for unethical behavior. So we're looking at the same situation again here of having a president steal an election, get into office, and then instead of taking care of the country, having to spend all their time fending off the investigations, managing the cover-up, burning the White House tapes or whatever else is going to be going on here. Our country is very fragile right now. The last thing we need is somebody in the White House who's so busy trying to stay out of jail that they're not there to do the job. And that's another reason we need to get Donald Trump into that White House. Now, a lot of Hillary's defenders are saying that it's pointless following this email scandal. She's going to win the election, and she'll be able to pardon herself. Now, no president has ever pardoned themselves. And getting on back to the Richard Nixon situation, if there was ever a president who wanted to pardon themselves, it would have been Richard Nixon. He couldn't do it. It's not legal. Now, technically, before you can apply for a presidential pardon, you have to be convicted of a crime. And upon conviction of a felony, you forfeit your public office. That's how it's supposed to work. Now, Gerald Ford broke that by issuing a blanket pardon to Richard Nixon and all of his associates for all crimes past, present, and future. And he got away with it because all of Washington, D.C. wanted Watergate to go away before that pathway to the John F. Kennedy assassination opened up and really made life that much harder for all of them. But if ever there was a president who was going to pardon themselves, it would have been Richard Nixon. He didn't. That proves you can't. Now, one observer has suggested that when we get down close to the end of the year, we might actually see Obama step down and make Joe Biden the president. Then Biden could issue a blanket pardon on Hillary and Obama and everybody. It would be just as bogus as that of Gerald Ford. Because technically you cannot apply for and receive a pardon until you have been found guilty of something. Now we're seeing more and more stories that along with the FBI investigating the email server, the FBI wanted to investigate the Clinton Foundation for many of the same reasons that Larry Klayman brought a RICO lawsuit against them, pay for play, which we now know was going on. Even the Clinton Foundation and State Department staffers were calling it pay for play. And the Justice Department kept saying, no, you will not investigate the Clinton Foundation. You have no evidence. Well, Loretta, answer a simple question for me. How is the FBI supposed to get the evidence of wrongdoing by the Clinton Foundation if they're not allowed to investigate the Clinton Foundation? When you look at how much of this money that's been flowing around came from and went to terrorism, shouldn't the same standards that are being used on the American people apply to our politicians? The NSA doesn't need a warrant to spy on us, to read our emails, to look into our computers. Why are warrants all of a sudden so important just because it's Hillary Clinton? Right now, she's a private citizen. She has no special legal prerogatives over me. Legally, Hillary Clinton and I are on the same level. If it's okay for the government to spy on me without a warrant, why aren't you spying on her foundation without a warrant? So basically it comes down to one of two things. Either Loretta Lynch made a bad judgment call and should resign, or she's part of the cover-up and she should be arrested. Now, if you are financially well off, and you have some risk capital, I would say that right now is a good time to go long on tar and feathers. I have a feeling there's going to be a run on those particular commodities not very far down the road. Needless to say, all of Hillary's defenders, by which I mean everybody neck deep in the corruption and the drug money and the rest of it, are leaping to her defense. Harry Reid actually went on out and said that FBI Director James Comey is in cahoots with Vladimir Putin. Howard Dean came on out and said James Comey is in cahoots with Vladimir Putin. And by the way, I don't even know what cahoots means, but that's what Howard Dean was saying. And I can imagine Vladimir Putin is laughing his head off over that one. Harry Reid is out there trying to push that the FBI director broke the Hatch Act, violated the Hatch Act. No. Obama using the White House and Air Force One for Hillary's campaign, that's a violation of the Hatch Act. Arresting a criminal for a criminal action is not a violation of the Hatch Act, even if that arrested criminal is running for high office. And that's not just my opinion. For, the top constitutional law expert, Professor Jonathan Turley, is saying absolutely not. James Comey did not violate the law, announcing that he was reopening this investigation. So what is the Hillary campaign out there doing? The same thing they always do. They're playing victims. It's the vast right-wing conspiracy. They've gone back to that one. And at this point, I think our response to the vast right-wing conspiracy is to just laugh our heads off, because she's played it so many times. Next, she's going to come on out and say that Director Comey just hates women, and that's why he hated Huma Abedin, and he went after her laptop, and he hated Hillary Clinton. It's amazing. And Hillary is out there grabbing all of her cronies, everybody that she's got the blackmail goods on, to just go after James Comey. Retired prosecutors, they're trying to say that Comey is being partisan, trying to get Eric Holder to weigh in on there. And, I mean, talk about short-term memory. Do we all not remember last summer when FBI Director James Comey put his job, his career, his reputation on the line trying to protect Hillary Clinton from the consequences of her own actions, got up there and listed the felony Title 18 violations Hillary Clinton had committed, and then came on out and said, we're not going to recommend charges. Yeah, that's it. And here we are only a few months later, and Comey's been forced by the sheer volume and weight of the evidence of Hillary's crimes to actually say there's a sheer volume and weight of Hillary's crimes, and Hillary's just turning on him. Oh, you're partisan. You're a part of the vast right-wing conspiracy. You're an agent of Vladimir Putin. And just on and on and on. You can almost, see them frothing at the mouth. And how quickly they forget. Hillary's people are out there screaming about, this 11th hour indictment or charge. It's partisan. We cannot be allowed. Well, let's set the Wayback Machine 24 years ago, when President George Herbert Walker Bush was ahead in the polls for his second term in the White House against Bill Clinton. And the special prosecutor looking into Iran-Contra brought new charges against Bush, which allowed Bill Clinton to proclaim that he was running against a culture of corruption. Actually, he was part of the culture of corruption, but they're playing off of each other. It's like pro wrestling, the Clintons and the Bushes. They're going to make believe they're hitting each other, but they're really all in the same business. But it was okay for Bill Clinton to take advantage of a 11th hour indictment 24 years ago, but no, can't be now. Times are different. We don't do that anymore because it's the Clintons here. And Hillary is out there demanding transparency and saying you've got to make all your information known now. Hillary is basically doing a gamble here. She knows that even with computer searches, they can't go through all 650,000 emails between now and the election. So she's setting an impossible goal. And if they're saying we can't release it, she'll say, they're playing politics. Trey Gowdy's already one-upped her on that one, saying Hillary Clinton wants transparency. She can release the 650,000 emails today, the non-classified ones. Just do a dump. Put them on out there. Let the American people look. She's not going to do that. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the corporate media, which was showing signs of a revolt last Friday, has had their leash yanked good and hard, and they're out there admitting that Hillary's unfavorable ratings have hit a brand new all-time record high, but still insist she's leading Donald Trump in the polls. It doesn't make sense. What the corporate media is trying to sell you is this idea that the candidate who is the least trustworthy and most disliked is still somehow ahead of Donald Trump. It just doesn't make any sense. Not one bit. Now, apparently over in California, somebody got a video of Democratic operatives offering to pay halfway house patients a $300 rebate check if they would vote for Hillary Clinton. That's a felony, by the way. WikiLeaks is out with new information as well. They've caught Hillary Clinton, the Hillary campaign, in another major lie. Remember when this guy Creamer came on out and was caught on Project Veritas talking about how they were paying people to commit violence and disrupt Donald Trump's rallies? And, of course, immediately he was disavowed by the Hillary Clinton campaign, specifically Robbie Mook. Well, too bad. You know, Mook made that claim on a CNN interview, and WikiLeaks has dropped an email that shows that Creamer was in reality a consultant for the Democratic National Committee and very close in the chain of command to Robbie Mook. Ooh, they lied again, they lied again, they lied again. And they're still playing these stupid games. Over the weekend, somebody showed up at a Trump rally wearing a Hillary for President t-shirt and then made a point of shouting anti-Semitic comments at the press pool. Not up in the gallery, not to the other voters. The guy literally went up to where the press was assembled and was shouting anti-Semitic comments. Just one guy. And the media immediately went ballistic. Oh, this proves Donald Trump's an anti-Semite. He and his followers are all white supremacists. They hate the Jews. They blah, 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 blah. I mean, the guy's an obvious plant. You go over to his Facebook page. It's been inactive for like 4 years until just before he went on out and did this thing at the Trump rally. They're still playing these games and thinking that you are all dumb enough to fall for it. But right now the corporate media is looking for any excuse to not have to cover the latest bombshell in this email situation. And there's nothing out there for them to grab onto. They're having to make the news. Gilad Atzmon waded on in with an article called October Boomerang, reminding everybody about how hard the Hillary campaign was trying to manufacture some kind of sexual misbehavior for Donald Trump, only to have Anthony Weiner's games with underage girls on the internet blow up in their face. And basically saying that what we're seeing right now in front of us is more than an election. It is a dynamic shift in consciousness of the American people that could lead to a complete social transformation. And I think it's high time it happened. Susan Sarandon said it best. A vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for the status quo. The status quo is not working. WikiLeaks is still teasing that there is more yet to come. When all this information is out, Hillary is done. The only way she can get out of this mess is by stealing the election and pardoning herself. But again, in principle, a president can't pardon himself. Richard Nixon wasn't able to. Another article from Gilad Atzmon on being aloof and democratic. And just pointing about how the Clintons and the Democrats keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. They keep replaying the same propaganda card over and over and over again, even when it's obvious it's not working. How did they get into this self-destructive tendency? Hubris. They've started to believe their own publicity, that they're impossible to defeat, that they're going to win, that nothing that they do is ever wrong. And I worked in Hollywood long enough to understand very clearly, when you start believing your own PR, you're in big trouble. You are headed for a major, major disaster. Now, last week we were talking, this being Halloween today, where somebody had pointed out that in elections past, Halloween masks were a very reliable indicator of who was going to win the election. And this year, the Donald Trump masks were outselling the Hillary Clinton masks by 2-1. Well, Hillary's campaign couldn't take that lying down, so they came on out with a positive spin, where they had somebody come on out and say, well, look, little girls don't wear masks the way little boys do, not realizing that's a sexist comment in and of itself. And there's no foundation for it whatsoever. I mean, trick-or-treating past, I've seen masks on everybody. And I've seen girls without masks, I've seen boys without masks. And you cannot rule out the possibility of a little girl wanting to wear a Donald Trump mask. But there is nothing, no aspect of this campaign that is so tiny they cannot put some kind of a spin on it. All right, we're going to go back to taking phone calls. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I'm sitting here as I'm listening to you. I'm also switching back between MSNBC and CNBC and CNN. And just to let you know, on Jake Tapper reports, they've got they're talking about how they're showing a film by a testimony by Michael Moore, who looks like a troll, giving anti-Trump stuff. They just put together a thing about how Trump and the IRS, he should have been released his tax forms. Then they're saying they have Paul Begala on a little, who's been apologizing for the Clintons for at least 20 years, and two other people on there. Jake Tapper himself was one of the people who was named as giving one of the questions to Donna Brazile.
Yeah, that's blown up in their face as well here. Listen, Peter, stay on the phone. We've got to do a break for commercials. Stay on the phone. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And while we were on the commercial break, I'm getting all these emails from people coming on in saying the same thing that you are, which, I mean, I don't want to increase the viewership of CNBC and MSNBC, but apparently the only people still watching them are the ones that are watching to see what it is they're lying about today. But again, from the point of view of the corporate media, they're literally fighting for their continued existence, because if they are not able to put Hillary over on us, they're all finished. They're going to have to give up those $1 million paychecks and all of those fancy studios and everything. It's going to be the end of what's been a very plush, luxurious existence. And we've already got Obama out there saying we need a curating process, and CNN is out there saying you've got to beware of all the fake news, meaning anybody but CNN. So they're in thrash mode.
Mike, they're trotting out Harry Reid again, and they're also resuscitating They're saying that Comey blocked linking the Russians to the hacks because it would influence. They're trying to tar him with the Russian tar baby. You know what I mean?
Oh,
and
my.
And they had another guy on that was saying that, just like a previous caller who called in and said, well, she could have just been trying to charge her phone. We're talking about Huma on something, and inadvertently 650,000 emails went onto her computer that she didn't know about.
Yeah, folks. Yeah, well, I was kind of suspicious when that guy called in on that one anyway. Folks, you can't fit 650,000 emails onto a smartphone. They don't make smartphones that big, okay?
Yeah, and how long would it take, by the way, to download 650,000 emails onto a smartphone, if it could be done?
Well, no, it's not going to fit on the smartphone, but it's going to take a very, very long time. I mean, it's absurd on the face of it, but they're out there with all of this desperation stuff, and I don't even know anybody who watches CNBC or MSNBC anymore. I mean, their ratings are abysmal. I think CNN is pulling smaller than the gardening channel right now.
Mike, they just CNN had an ad for their whole panoply for their news guys, Brian Williams and what's his name, the guy who
Brian Williams. Wasn't he the guy who claimed he was the first man on the moon or something? Pete Williams is another guy. Then they had who's the guy with the gray hair that all these guys. I don't care. I don't care. I don't watch these channels. I don't care who's on them. And I don't even watch the channels that have the very, busty blonde babes in very tight-fitting clothes. I don't even watch them anymore.
Well, Mike, my point is almost the entire range of all their guys have already been named as people that are on the Hillary bandwagon, that have already been suborned by Hillary.
Yeah.
It's already been named an email. It's the whole lineup.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're all in the pay of the Hillary campaign, and everybody knows it. All right, we got to take a break for our top of the hour station identification. Thank you for the call, Peter. We're going to let you go here. We got a bunch of other callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back with hour number 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we get back to the phones here, a couple of interesting stories to get into. If you are following the World Series, game number 5 last night, behind the sportscasters, some of the people at the game held up a giant Hillary for Prison sign. It actually stayed up there for quite a while before they were able to get security over there and say, you can only have sports team signs here, you know. And, of course, the Democrats are furious. How could you allow that on TV? You know, well, what the audience wants here. And we're still seeing the corporate media is out there in lockstep, trying to say, oh, no, this thing is over. It's going to be Hillary. Just get used to it. It's going to be Hillary. No, we're not going to get used to it. We are under no obligation to accept any election in which fraud has been involved. And this is the most fraudulent election in the nation's history. Over at InfoWars, they're interviewing Bev Harris from Black Box Voting. They're talking about how they're going to steal this election. And the corporate media is out there trying to tell you that being a loyal, patriotic American means that you will accept a fraudulent election and a Hillary Clinton presidency. No, we will not. You show me a law anywhere that says we have to accept any leader that steals their office. It is just not to be done here. Now, needless to say, social media has been brought on board with the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the tags regarding the new FBI emails are not trending on any of this stuff. The attitude coming out of Twitter and Facebook and BuzzFeed and Snapchat is, we have cute kitten videos. That's really all you slaves need to be looking at. We've got cute kitten videos here. And if that doesn't work, we'll even drop kittens in a blender, but that's really all you should be looking at. Over at Twitter, they've discovered that if they slightly misspell the tags, they get past the filters. And they're starting to use tags that are slightly misspelled for things like Hillary for Prison, and it just immediately shoots to the top of the trend. And it just underscores the fact that these large social media corporations are just as corrupt as the TV networks and the newspapers. Now, speaking of corrupt, latest WikiLeaks has a second case where Donna Brazile leaked town hall questions to Hillary Clinton before the actual broadcast. And CNN has now severed ties. Donna is saying she's resigned. CNN is saying we kind of kicked her out. We're not comfortable with the fact that she was leaking this stuff. But, you know, CNN should have known better. Okay, because back when she was working for the Dukakis campaign, Donna Brazile was behind this completely bogus rumor of Bush having some kind of a sexual tryst that turned out to be completely bogus. She's a political hatchet queen. That's what she does. And CNN should have known better. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Daniel in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I personally, I think what we're seeing is the consolidation of power. I think the globalists, the money junkies, are abandoning her. I think the Clintons have been too high on the hog. They've been too reckless. And you know, you're a big movie buff. It was a scene in Goodfellas when they just went through a big heist and they made $3 million, and one of them is spending all the money, is being too reckless, and you know, they had to take him
Okay,
out.
I'm not sure what you mean by consolidating power. I mean, the globalists literally bet their agenda on a Hillary Clinton presidency, because Donald Trump is most assuredly not part of the globalist agenda. He wants strong, controlled borders, as do the American people. I think what it is the globalists made a very major mistake Same one the global warming people did. The global warming people were convinced that science could be subordinated to a political agenda. The globalists are convinced that human psychology can be subordinated to political agenda. And, of course, all the rioting and crime they have all over Europe from the refugee problem puts the lie to that. And so the globalists were really betting on Hillary, and now they're realizing too late, I might add. If she goes down, it could pull that entire globalist structure down with her, and they're stuck with her. They're going to have to ride it out, and they're going to try and steal this any way that they can, knowing if they fail, it's the end of the party.
I haven't gotten that far, but I still do personally believe that that is the game plan. That's my opinion. I think it's
okay.
The game
What
plan,
is the game plan? You haven't told us what you think the game plan is.
Well, I think that I think this is what Hitler did for World War II, was purging all the incompetent people in his in his arena. And
no, he didn't. He promoted them. He promoted them. So his inner circle, there were people in there even more twisted than Anthony Weiner. But they were loyal to him because they knew that without his patronage, because of their own personal failings, they could never do as well in society as they were doing, being a loyal servant to the leader. And that's what Hillary has surrounded herself with. And it's a classic repeat of a classic mistake. Anyway, listen, Daniel, I need to let you go. We got a bunch of callers here. I want to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are now rejoining our network. We're taking phone calls and talking about the political turmoil the United States is currently in, where we have obviously the corrupt oligarchical establishment, the globalists, the New World Order, whatever label you want to put on them. They're in a total panic that they could still lose this thing despite all the massive election fraud and media support for Hillary Clinton. They could still lose this thing. And what we're hearing from people out in the field, as you can probably imagine, there's real polling going on, and people are starting to ask the pollsters calling them at home who's actually winning. And according to the emails I'm getting, they're being told it's Trump way ahead, way, way ahead. Of course, you'll never see that in the corporate media. But that's what we're getting from the grassroots. All right, let's see. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, thanks, Mike. Listen, this election fraud bombshell that hit today, you mentioned the blackboxvoting.com is a must. I wrote down some points for you to see what you think. Bev Harris, was the election fraud expert, and she revealed that the control, a central tabulation center waits for the votes to come in to them from all the machines, and then they change the numbers. And more than half of voting machines take a photo of every ballot, and this electronic file is evidently public record, hard to get, but save that file, she said. Now, the Hillary people, since this central tabulation center is going to change things once they get them all, Hillary's people, she said, create a media narrative, and that they package the propaganda. So they plan to take, according to Bev Harris, they plan to take these states, Georgia, Utah, Alaska, and Mississippi, and the narrative is that these Republican states will go Democratic. That's where they're going to push. And now Ben Smith showed Bev Harris. I don't know where he's from. He's an African American. I'm not sure where he lives, but he unraveled the whole show and did controls and what does this affect if you do this and what. He took the mechanics apart and figured this out and told her so. He's very key too, Ben Smith, who showed her the key to unlocking this fraud. Now, they said that, or Bev said this all was, she said put in, I guess started in June 2001 by a guy who worked for Watergate, the Watergate people under Nixon. It was the head of Watergate under Nixon. It started this whole thing, and I'm assuming that they were talking about this electric fraud protocol.
Well, ever since these electronic voting machines have been brought on board and mandated by the U.S. government, there's never been an election where there hasn't been fraud. And every time the fraud is discovered, they're saying, oh, it's a calibration issue, it's a glitch, pay no attention to it, there's nothing to see here. And again, right now, the United States election system lacks any credibility. The only Western industrialized nation with a less trustworthy election system than the United States is Panama. And it really is a joke. And how we're going to defeat this is to get everybody to wear red on Election Day if you are voting for Donald Trump, so that people can look around and see for themselves which way their community actually voted. So if the media comes on in and says, honest to goodness, all these GOP states, last, late night sudden shift to the Democrats, we're all going to know that they're lying. I mean, we know that they're lying anyway. Yeah. Let's stop being polite about it. We know they're lying. We know they're trying to steal this election. If they want to trigger a violent revolution in this country, it seems like that's their goal almost.
Some people want to change their votes.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
Do that.
Yeah, in some states you can, if you did early voting in some states, you can actually go back and change your vote, and that's become an issue apparently ever since this FBI reopened this email investigation. Now, some states, once you vote, that's it. You can't change it. But there are some states where you can file a special piece of paperwork and say, I've had second thoughts. I want to take back my vote for Hillary Clinton and change it to a vote for Donald Trump. And they are required to accept it. But we do know that this election system we have in this country is designed to allow elections to be stolen. We don't need central tabulation centers. We don't need electronic voting machines. It's very easy to have honest, fair, accurate elections in this country. All of the electronics and tabulation and everything is designed to obfuscate the fact that our elections are being stolen on a regular basis.
Right. And it's been going on for quite a while, evidently.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Glenn, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Wow. I forgot I was on hold.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I keep thinking this Hillary thing. I keep thinking of that scene from the James Bond movie GoldenEye, where the evil level 1 computer programmer Boris is always keeps saying, "I'm invincible."
Yes.
Invincible. And he misses a lot of close calls. And then at the end, if he thinks everything's over, he goes, "Yes, I'm invincible." He throws his hands up in the air, and the liquid nitrogen tanks behind him burst and turn him into an ice sculpture.
Well, that would be a nice thing to have happen. But I think, behind all of the boasting and bragging and chest thumping that we're seeing, where they're basically out there saying, we're going to steal this election for Hillary, you might as well get used to it. First of all, we're not going to get used to it. I refuse to accept any election where fraud has been detected. If there's fraud in the election, it's an illegal, illegitimate, unconstitutional government. Second, when you look at how they're behaving right now, since the FBI reopened this investigation, to me, it feels like they're in a panic. That there is such a landslide for Donald Trump. All the election fraud can't overcome it. And election fraud you can get away with when it's a close race. But if it's really a landslide for Donald Trump and they try and reverse it, they literally could trigger a revolution in this country. I would not like to see that, but better that than a Hillary Clinton presidency. And I'll tell you why. So far, this election has set a record for big money pouring on in. Something like $6.6 billion is poured into this election. The people pouring that money in, and it's basically these top 10 families. They're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They want something back for it. When you look at all the money Hillary Clinton has taken from Wall Street and all these other corporations, if she gets into that White House, in between fending off the ongoing investigations, she's going to be there looting and plundering the nation to pay back her supporters. That's not a president who's looking after the country as a whole. And that's what we need right now.
Right. And even if, if Donald Trump gets in, even if he did nothing more than A, prevent World War III, and B, appoint some decent Supreme Court justices during his tenure, that would be good enough to buy us some time to avert utter destruction.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If Trump gets in, we might actually be able to avoid the collapse of the United States of America. If Hillary steals it, it's a done deal. There's no way to save the nation at that point. If he gets Trey Gowdy as the Attorney General, I mean, that would really be wonderful. Anyway, Glenn, going to let you go. The phone lines are filled, and I got news to get to. We're going to go to James in Tokyo. James, Ohio gozaimasu, o genki desu ka? What's on your mind today?
Genki desu. Michael, it's Halloween, and I'd appreciate it if you called me by my pseudonym, Halloween name, Carlos Danger.
Carlos
Actually, I was
Danger.
thinking of dressing up like him. But it's too cold to walk around in my underwear.
Yeah, I can
Your voice
imagine.
sounds a lot better than last week.
Yeah, I'm shaking. I'm almost over it, and my energy's back. Claire will tell you I'm back to being my normal obnoxious self. And, there's still a little bit of it left, but I sang with Claire's choir on Sunday, and I managed to hit all the notes, including a couple of the low ones I couldn't reach before, so it was kind of a happy compromise.
But you have a happier tone in your voice. I want to talk about the election a little bit.
Sure.
First of all, I think that there's no way that new info got out without Obama knowing about it.
Which
I think
info?
They, pretty much the new email info on Huma's.
I disagree because this actually originated, as far as I can tell, with New York authorities looking in to Anthony Weiner's sexting problem. And then it was presented to Comey. Comey was forced to act on it. It clearly took the Hillary campaign completely by surprise. I think it's taken the Obama completely by surprise. There's this video of Joe Biden talking about it on an interview, and partway through where he's saying, I don't know where all this stuff came from, and the commentator says, well, this came from Anthony Weiner. And you should see Joe Biden's face where it's just like, oh, God, Weiner again. And I think it was a big surprise to a lot of people.
But Comey put it through Loretta Lynch. She doesn't have any more credibility.
No, Lynch tried to block it. Lynch tried to block it.
On the tarmac.
No.
Who takes the fifth. And she definitely told Obama. So this is what I feel. And I feel that
okay,
what's coming down is so bad.
James, your timeline is a little bit off. We're not talking about the older email scandal and Bill Clinton shanghaiing Loretta Lynch. We're talking about what came out over this last weekend. That appears to have taken everybody by surprise. Loretta Lynch tried to stop James Comey from moving on this, but Comey was basically being forced because if he hadn't gone public on it, the New York authorities were going to go public on it anyway, and then those emails would have been completely out of government control at that point.
Well, and one other thing I want to say is you said if Hillary steals it, it's a done deal. I don't think so because I think there's a possibility that in Florida that Donald Trump can contest it due to those double ballots in Broward, and also recently she was seen talking to the head of the election officials from Palm Beach County, and I think that's.
No, what I meant when I said it's a done deal. If Hillary steals the White House, this nation is finished. There's going to be no way to save it. If Donald Trump can get into the White House, there's a possibility we could avoid the collapse of the United States and start rebuilding back to what we used to have 20, 30 years ago. That's what I meant by done deal. As far as the election is concerned, if Hillary steals it, Donald Trump should contest it. We should all contest it. We need 300 million Americans suing for a hand recount of all the ballots.
I think the best scenario right now is for Assange's new info to come out where he says that Hillary will be indicted and hopefully arrested, and it will save America, all this hardship of going through an elected president like Clinton who has to go through the impeachment process. I think that would be just the best scenario for everyone.
I agree. I agree. We're headed into Richard Nixon territory here. Stolen election, a president that we know is a criminal before they even get into office. And like I said, Hillary Clinton, when she's in that Oval Office, if she steals it, she's going to be spending all of her time heading off investigators and defending herself, and the rest of the time plundering the nation for her backers. She's not going to have any time left over to actually do any kind of a job for the American people and the American nation. And that's why this is so dangerous right now. All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, James. We're going to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a little bit of a correction from that previous phone call. The website for Bev Harris is called blackboxvoting.org, not com. blackboxvoting.org. And if you have not already seen it, there was a wonderful documentary, it was on HBO, called Hacking Democracy, that focuses on Bev Harris and black box voting. And the end of it shows how one of these electronic voting machines can have the outcome of an election changed without even touching the machine itself. That segment is available on YouTube, Black Box Voting, The Hack. If you have not seen it, you need to see it. You need to share it with everybody that you know. Because the one thing that we can take away from the establishment is this assurance that our elections are honest and accurate and fair. No, they're not. It's very easy to have an honest, fair, and accurate election. All righty, let's see. We're going to go back to the phones. Nick in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you?
Doing fine.
Good. It's my second time calling in. Love the show. Thank you for everything that you do. I had a quick question about the Electoral College, and I've been hearing a lot of different things. And so basically, it's my understanding that some of the members are pledged to vote for whoever they're going to vote for, regardless of the popular vote. So I was wondering if you could shed a little light on how, that kind of process works, and, whether, how much our actual individual vote does influence the Electoral College votes.
Well, okay. You may be confusing Electoral College and delegates. I had somebody write on in earlier and say, well, if Hillary's got all the delegates, it doesn't matter what the popular votes are. The delegates are only for the conventions. They're over and done with. Now, because our nation was set up in an age where horseback was still the fastest means of communication, and actually carrying huge numbers of votes across the countryside was impractical. Each state, when they had the general election, would elect people to go to the Electoral College, who would then go in and vote with a weight that represented the population of their state. They're supposed to represent the will of the voters in their state. There is sadly no law that constrains them to do so, and there have been one or two cases in the past where electors have been convinced to change sides and throw the election another way. But in theory, there is not supposed to be any kind of a mechanism for a member of the Electoral College to pre-pledge their vote a certain direction. Which doesn't mean it's not happening. We know that George Soros is out there running around with his checkbook, trying to find some way to put pressure on whoever potentially might be in the Electoral College. But it only underscores the fact that if Hillary wins this thing, steals this thing, that we know she didn't actually win. She stole it. It's right out of Joseph Stalin. They just want us to think an election has happened and the people who count the votes are making the real decisions. And that's not America.
And that does bring me to my next question is, is there some mechanism for accountability? Are we able to say, okay, well, this is a red state, but we have one or two people in the Electoral College who voted blue, despite the way the state voted, and can we hold them to account and verify that and show the public?
Unfortunately, there is no accountability in the system, and it's by design. It's like we saw out there in San Diego, where there was a lawsuit filed over the mishandling of the absentee ballots, and the judge said, yeah, clearly some fraud took place here, but as the state of California has already certified the election, there is no legal remedy, which is why, unfortunately, the illegal remedies are starting to be talked about and urged all across this country. And again, I don't want to see that, but you can only push a population so far before they're going to stand up and say, this is ridiculous, this is absurd. And in this day and age, we don't need an electoral college. And when we talk about the blueprint for the new America, we certainly can see direct participatory democracy. And it's very easy to have honest elections. I refuse to believe that the nation that put men on the moon can't have a trustworthy, honest election system. I refuse to believe that companies that have a reputation for automated bank teller machines that never lose a penny from one end of the country to another design voting machines with 12 different ways to change the outcome. It is by design. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, Nick. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show here. And apparently Israel is starting to think that Trump may pull this off. Now, up until now, they've been fully on board with Hillary's campaign. If you read the Israeli media, they think Donald Trump is terrible. He's going to be a terrible president for Israel, and Hillary's going to be great. But all of a sudden, the last couple of weeks, we're starting to see Israel saying, you know, we can work with Donald Trump. He's got lots of good things about it. It's not like he's really against Israel. And so we're seeing Israel start to hedge its bets, starting to try and play both sides against the middle. And I think that's very, very significant, that Israel thinks Trump may be unbeatable, even with all the election fraud. All right, let's take a phone call. Jeff in St. Paul, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, it's been a while since I called, but I was thinking of calling the last couple of weeks asking about this Anthony Weiner. What's his role? Because, you know, within like now 10 days, I mean, he's kind of a spoiler. And
well, he's been a spoiler all along. I mean, he's Huma Abedin's husband, and a lot of people.
Is he some sort of intelligence operative?
No, he's a former congressman. Well, he may be, but he's a former congressman, and apparently his predilection for approaching underage girls online is something he has not been able to get under control. Going back for at least 5 years, and it cost him his seat in Congress. It's been a continuing source of embarrassment to Democrats and to Huma Abedin and to Hillary. Apparently, the New York authorities were investigating him on yet another case of soliciting online sexual acts from an underage girl. And when they seized his laptop, they stumbled across these 650,000 State Department emails. They went to the FBI, and because the New York authorities were going to go public with this, Comey was forced to do something about it.
Hey, you know what? When the kitty video stopped working,
yep,
you have to like not let them see any for 4 days. Let them. But if otherwise,
but they go into withdrawal and start coughing up hairballs.
But what you do is you put on the kitty and the bunny videos.
Ah, okay.
That's
all right.
What I got. Okay, take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to let you go. Steve in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I disagree with one of your callers there, talked about the rigging of the elections. I think, yeah, they could probably change it after the fact, but I think these machines that were sitting in these warehouses, the seals were broken. I think software was placed in there. And so the manipulation of the vote will have done through a logarithm, much like the gaming system.
You mean an algorithm?
Casinos.
You mean an algorithm?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you've hit on something that's very ironic, because out in Las Vegas, the electronic gambling machines in those casinos are subject to very strict controls, constant inspections by outside third-party authorities. The software for all of these machines is a public record. And all people are doing is playing for nickels, dimes, and quarters on these things, and yet these machines that decide the future of the nation are locked away. It's proprietary. You're not allowed to look inside and know what's going on. And Bev Harris found that one of the earliest systems, the GEM systems by Diebold, had at least 12 different ways you could change the outcome of an election and not leave any trace. That has to be by design. It is very easy to design a foolproof, accurate, honest election system. I've already outlined one that doesn't require central tabulation centers, and it's a very, very good system. But the system we have is intentionally designed to conceal from the American public the actual process of counting the votes, which, by the way, is what led to the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, when the people were told, we'll count the votes in private and tell you what you wanted. And they got guns and seized the ballot boxes and had an honest count.
Yeah, I agree with you. The system was designed with fraud in mind. Hey, last comment. I did watch Vaxxed last night, And I want to recommend to your listening audience that take 80 minutes out of your time if you have children, grandchildren, and sit down and watch this. And you're going to be you're going to be convinced of the evidence that, first of all, the CDC is not working for us in our best behalf. They're working with the pharmaceutical companies, but it was 80 minutes well worth spent sitting down and watching that movie. Watch it.
All right. Well, definitely that's one people need to be looking at, along with all these other videos like Clinton Cash and all of that stuff that's getting on out there. All right, Steve, we're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines for a little while here because I want to get caught up on the talking points. We'll open the phone lines up again a little bit later in the show. Speaking of Las Vegas, if you go on out there, okay, to the websites for the bookies, and there's a website called oddschecker.com where all of the major betting organizations, legal gambling organizations, have their odds for the upcoming presidential election. Now, these are people who make and lose money guessing correctly what's going to happen. And they have Donald Trump winning in a landslide. And I presume, being in Las Vegas, they're very much aware of the possibility of cheating. We're starting to see some of the corporate media break ranks with the Hillary Clinton campaign. Radio host Derek Hunter was firmly on board the never Trump, never Trump, never Trump. He's done a 180, did a brilliant on-air case for voting for Donald Trump. He's now part of the Never Hillary campaign. Doug Schoen, former Hillary supporter, says he can't support her any longer. There just comes a point where the corruption piles up too high, the stench becomes too unbearable, where you have to say, this goes beyond party loyalty or any remuneration I'm going to get from a Hillary Clinton presidency. It's just time to bail. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there are some states, and this has become an issue. They're being contacted by voters who voted early, who in the wake of this latest revelation about more Hillary Clinton emails are saying, I want to change my vote. Most states you cannot, but there are states where you can. Wisconsin, Minnesota, New York, Connecticut, Louisiana, here in Hawaii, and Pennsylvania and Michigan. You can actually go to your Board of Elections and say, I voted early, I want to change my vote. They'll give you a form where you'll put out all of your information and say, I previously voted for Hillary and I want to change my vote to Donald Trump. So we're going to start seeing that. Latest USC Daybreak poll, Hillary Clinton's numbers are plummeting, Trump is surging, and this is exceeding the skewing that we've seen the USC Daybreak poll try and engage in recently. Now, not too long ago, the corporate media was trumpeting Hillary Clinton's 12-point lead over Donald Trump, and they only had to oversample Democrats by 17% to get that number. Now they're saying she's leading by just 1 point. That's within the statistical margin of error, but still close enough for the election stealers to steal the thing and say, oh, well, you know, who's going to know? Trump is gaining steam in Florida's early elections. And this is all numbers coming out before the revelation of yet more Hillary Clinton email scandals. Actual early vote totals are showing Trump is winning Florida by a large, large margin. Now, over on Infowars.com, they had an interview with former Jimmy Carter pollster Pat Cadell. And according to him, Hillary Clinton is hemorrhaging support since Friday's announcement that there's going to be a reopening of the Hillary Clinton email scandal. And he's basically saying we could see a repeat of the 1980 election when Ronald Reagan, who was seen as the outsider, won in a landslide. That would be a good thing. Apparently up in Chicago, one of the local politicians there, just within their own district, has discovered 119 dead residents who have voted 229 times since they were buried. Very appropriate for Halloween. Beware the walking dead Hillary Clinton voters. You can recognize them. They're the ones out there saying, must have brains. So. Now, there's an interesting article coming out of citizenwells.com saying that even if Hillary steals the election next week, there's still a long path between there and the inauguration where if Hillary is indicted on felony violations, that she could still be removed from the race, that there are laws and protections in there. The system originally was set up to try and keep criminals out of high office, not smooth and ease their way in, and those laws are still on the books. And this article has a very telling quote, one of my favorites. We, the people, are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men, and I might add women, who pervert the Constitution. This is from Abraham Lincoln. We, the people, are the ultimate authority in this country. Government is supposed to work for us. They're supposed to comply with the laws and the Constitution. And when they do not, we go back to that Declaration of Independence and that line that begins, when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same pattern, evinces a design to reduce us under absolute despotism, it is our right, it is our duty to throw off such government. We may be there all over again. Not too long ago I wrote an article about how the Declaration of Independence is valid today. That we, in many ways, are suffering the same abuses. We're suffering the same abuses as the colonists in the 1700s. We're being forced to be dependent on a private central bank for all of our currency, loaned to us at interest. We're being forced to be dependent on certain favored corporations. We don't have government troops quartered in our homes. They don't need to. They've got our own telephones and computers spying on us to make sure we're behaving. Finally, earlier this year, there was an incident that sort of came and went, didn't get a lot of coverage, where Donald Trump's plane had to do an emergency landing because of a mysterious malfunction. And apparently, Mike Pence's plane slid off the runway at New York Airport. They're saying it was because of the heavy rain. Maybe, maybe not. Aircraft have anti-lock, anti-skid braking systems. They had them before your cars did, also. Alrighty, so let's turn to the war zones. Emphasis on the plural. There is still a world at war out there, despite the political campaign. And there's an article out here over in Blacklisted News confirming something that we mentioned a while ago. Syria is really all about a pipeline. And it's all about money. And what it really comes down to is a rather absurd situation where Israel is now starting to harvest oil and gas out of the Golan, which is still technically Syrian territory. It's under Israeli occupation. But Israel is bringing in all these various companies to start harvesting the oil and gas, and Israel wanted a pipeline to deliver the gas and oil they're stealing from Syria to Europe. And that pipeline had to go across Syrian territory. So this is what was presented to Bashar al-Assad. Israel is stealing oil and gas from your territories in the Golan. We want you to let us put a pipeline across your territory so we can take this stolen oil and gas and sell it to Europe. And Assad said no. And that's really what set this war off. Just like the war in Afghanistan began with an oil pipeline right of way back in the 1990s. Now, according to the U.S. Inspector General, up in Afghanistan, the installed U.S. puppet regime lost a lot of territory over this last summer to the Taliban. Afghanistan wants their country back. They want it under Afghan rule. They're sick and tired of the U.S. puppet rulers, as so many other countries are, and they're regaining territory. Now, Iran has come on out talking about what's going on down in Yemen, where Saudi Arabia is using U.S. weapons against Yemen civilians, hospitals, schools, things like that. And Iran has declared that the U.S. bears some responsibility for these war crimes. And to allow the gun grabbers to hoist with their own petard, yes, if we are going to say that the manufacturers and sellers of guns bear responsibility for the crimes committed with the guns, then yes, the United States government bears the responsibility for the war crimes being committed in Yemen by Saudi Arabia using U.S.-supplied weapons. You don't get to have it both ways. Now, apparently over in Syria and Iraq, the U.S. Special Forces, you know, those boots on the ground that Obama promised you were not going to be there, those guys. The U.S. forces are getting impatient with the British SAS, who are very concerned that they not be committing war crimes. And so they're constantly double-checking their orders and saying, wait a minute, let's look at this. This could be a war crime. We don't want to move forward. And, of course, the U.S. Special Forces are saying, well, we're immune from war crimes prosecutions anyway. We're going to be on the winning side. And so apparently it's led to quite a bit of friction within the command structure, where the U.S. Special Forces just want to go on out and do what they want to do. And the British are saying, wait a minute, we are really right at the edge of crossing from legal, legitimate war to war crimes. Not that either incursion into Iraq or Syria was legal in the first place, but that's kind of where we are on that. Now then, over at the United Nations, the General Assembly voted to begin negotiations on a treaty to ban all nuclear weapons. This is historic. This is the first time where the UN has taken up the issue of a global permanent ban on nuclear weapons, which I think we'd all agree is a really good idea. Now, not too surprisingly, the 8 nations that already have nuclear weapons opposed or abstained from the resolution. North Korea actually voted yes on this, despite all the brouhaha about North Korea's building nuclear bombs. And North Korea is probably realizing if there's a global ban on nuclear weapons, we've got better things to spend the money on. But the United States, Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, and Israel all voted against having negotiations to ban nuclear weapons, which only underscores the fact that, yes, Israel does have them. But the rest of the assembly said, yes, it's time to deal with these things. Get rid of them. Now, here is a very bizarre circumstance. Over at the United Nations Security Council, they're considering a Palestinian resolution that would condemn Israel's illegal settlement activity in the occupied West Bank. Israel has responded by saying that if the Security Council adopts this resolution, they will simply annex all the illegal settlements and declare them to be officially part of Israel. Talk about throwing a tantrum. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Late-breaking development here on the email scandal. As you know, when this story first broke on Friday, Loretta Lynch was telling the FBI, don't investigate, don't investigate. And then Comey said, I have to investigate. It's going to go public elsewhere. And then Loretta Lynch said, well, I'm not going to give you a warrant to look at the emails. And then finally she had to give him a warrant. Now, all of a sudden, the Department of Justice is out there saying, yes, there is something that we should look at here, and the Department of Justice is now going to step on in and look at these emails along with the FBI, and it'll all be under the control of Assistant Attorney General Peter J. Kadzik. There's only one problem. Assistant Attorney General Peter J. Kadzik is very, very good friends with John Podesta. They're pulling out all the plugs trying to disable this and hide from the American people just how criminal our entire government has become. Another article coming on out saying, will Barack Obama suspend the election if Hillary is forced out by the new FBI email investigation? Legally, he cannot. If Hillary Clinton is forced out, her vice president takes over the number 1 slot and the election proceeds. If Obama tries to suspend the election, that could trigger a violent uprising. A lot of angry people out there in the country right now. Getting on back to Israel, as you are probably aware, Roger Waters has taken a stand in support of Palestinian rights. And it has cost him millions of dollars, canceled concerts, canceled record deals. American Express canceled a sponsorship because you're not allowed to challenge Israel. Roger Waters, of course, has enough money where he can say, okay, fine. And But he's taking a stand on principle. It's costing him millions and millions of dollars. Story coming out of davidswanson.org. What is keeping the F-35 alive? And it's basically going on down this laundry list of all the problems with this boondoggle. It is the most expensive warplane ever developed. The software for the cannon will not be ready for at least another year. The helmet fire control systems, $400,000 each, still do not work. The so-called transparent cockpit system can't merge the images correctly. The networked radar system has trouble discriminating single versus multiple targets. Can't fly in the fog, can't fly in the rain. The original naval version couldn't land on carriers. They've managed to fix that. Engines keep exploding. The insulation in the wing tanks keeps flaking off. What's keeping it alive? Politics. Everybody's making money off the F-35. They don't want that money to stop, even if what they're producing is a piece of junk that could ultimately result in losing the coming war. Same thing with the Gerald R. Ford, same thing with the Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Freedom-class littoral combat ships, the F-22. It's all driven by money, not by making effective weapons. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to go ahead and open up the lines again. And let me just get this out of the way here. A lot of stuff to be doing here. Way too many buttons, I think. Now then, we're talking about the economy here, and we're talking about what's going on in Europe. As you know, the European banks are in a very fragile state, especially Deutsche Bank. And as is typical of all economies based on private central banking, they have to go on loaning more and more and more to keep the system going. It's actually a pyramid scheme. And this has led to some very reckless practices in the process of loaning. They just want that debt obligation on the books. That's the item of value. But right now, across all of the banks of Europe, there is now a total of $1.3 trillion in bad loans that they can't paper over any longer. And it's stressed to the breaking point. Now, over at Samsung, following the debacle of the Note 7, their operating profit has plunged 30%. That's a major, major hit. Apple is trying to move on in and push the iPhone 7 into this new vacuum. But Apple is taking a little bit of a risk because we're already hearing that their supply chain is unable to keep up with demand. And a lot of places that are carrying the iPhone 7 are telling their customers they're going to have to wait for the phone to actually be delivered. That's not a very good thing to be doing in an industry that thrives on instant consumer gratification, which the cell phone industry tends to do here. Twitter, and we've been talking about their censorship practices out there, is getting ready to lay off 9% of their global workforce, which I guess tells you when you start blocking political tweets, you're cutting off a lot of readership and a lot of ad impressions here. Now, Apple, even though demand for the iPhone 7 is picking up in the wake of the Galaxy Note 7 debacle, is still reporting its first annual revenue decline since 2001. And mind you, we're going into the Christmas shopping season here right now. Remember American Apparel? 2 years ago, they filed for bankruptcy and reorganization, attempted to restart. They've had to file for bankruptcy a second time now, according to Bloomberg. The retail economy isn't out there anymore. When you look at the massive fraud taking place on Wall Street, that is involving some of these iconic banks like Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, what that tells me is that the real economy of the nation, the economy that makes the entire nation work, people having high-paying jobs, able to buy homes, able to buy new cars, able to buy things at the shopping mall, that economy has already shut down. And they're keeping things ticking along through fraud and illusion and propaganda. And they don't really think these things too well. Now, right now, following subsidies and the rest of it, there's actually a glut in food production in the United States. This has led to plunging food prices, which has led to difficulties for food distribution companies and retailers. Walmart's closing stores, and farmers are facing financial ruin. All because of this tinkering by the U.S. government rather than allow supply and demand to be running the economy. But government can never allow things to run by itself because it only underscores you don't really need a government. Spain is going into their second month without a central government. They think it's great. Belgium went for almost 2 years without a central government. They were saying it was the best thing ever happened. And the first thing that occurs to me is, did it not occur to the morons in Washington, D.C., that if they were to take the surplus food being produced by our system and give it to the homeless and hungry in this country, that would drive the food prices back up? They really don't think very clearly in Washington, D.C. And it's a reminder that just because somebody is a really successful drug criminal or drug money launderer doesn't make them a good manager. Now, in another boost for Donald Trump, Obamacare is in serious, serious trouble. People who have got those Obamacare-compliant policies are starting to get the notices of the increase in fees that they're going to be looking at for the next term. It's an average of 25% increase in 2017. Some states, the increases are more than 50%. This to force you to buy a health insurance policy with a sky-high deductible that the vast majority of Americans will never exceed. The vast majority of Americans being forced to buy these very expensive health care policies will never actually use them in the year because they'll never hit that deductible. And it's not surprising that a lot of Americans are deciding to just drop these policies and accept the IRS penalties. So what's the government going to do? They're going to increase the IRS penalties because government never makes a mistake. They never mess anything up. They're going to go on fining you and penalizing you until you agree, oh yes, Obamacare was just the most wonderful thing that ever really happened. Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're talking about the economic news, little bits and dabs of stuff for the rest of the third hour. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443 if you care to call on in. Now, getting on to the immigration crisis. And by the way, somebody just put up an article, one of the members put up an article at WhatReallyHappened.com. Leaked images showing illegals casually strolling across an open border at the Rio Grande. And they're all being registered to vote for Hillary Clinton. Now, an article coming out of Zero Hedge, Germany's migrant rape crisis, where is the public outrage? Boy, do you remember back in the 1990s here in the U.S. with the militant feminism? You know, if you held a girl's hand without her permission, oh, that was a manifestation of rape and everything. But over in Europe right now, all these refugees are coming on in. They're sexually assaulting little kids at the swimming pool. Gang rapes all over the place. And oh, if you object to being raped, you're just being racist. And we're literally seeing how this rape crisis going on in Germany is being downplayed by the German authorities, pretty much glossed over by the media because they want to protect the refugee agenda. We make a big deal about rape only when it's going to help the liberals get into political power. And after that, you just shut the heck up. Story coming out of RIMF.com, the invasion from Mexico steps up. This dovetails with the article a member just put up at WhatReallyHappened.com. There has been a marked increase in the number of illegals pouring across the Mexico-U.S. border in the last few weeks. And the border guards are saying that this flood of illegals is being spurred on because these people are being told that if they get into the United States of America and vote for Hillary Clinton, they'll be given amnesty and allowed to stay. None of this is legal. Illegal immigrants are not supposed to vote in our elections. Now, we, the legal American citizens, have built this nation generation after generation after generation as our legacy to the next generation of Americans. And Hillary Clinton and her cronies are literally stealing what does not belong to them, the United States, and offering to give it to illegal immigrants and refugees who sneak in and vote her into power. There is going to be nothing left of the United States of America following a Hillary Clinton presidency. They're strip mining this nation for their own political gain. Australia has come up with a good idea. They're going to ban illegal migrants forever. If you try and sneak into Australia and you are caught and sent home, you are banned from legally applying for refugee status. In fact, you're not even going to be allowed to come back as a tourist. Good for the Australians. That's how you deal with it. I know everyone's talking about building Trump's wall across the Rio Grande. You don't need to do that. Just put some crocodiles in there. That'll solve the problem. And speaking of illegal immigrants, this being Christmas time of year, you probably, as I do, remember these kiosks that were all over the shopping malls selling these Dead Sea facial products, and how annoying and obnoxious all these people at these kiosks were. They would literally stand in your way, and they'd move back and forth to block you until you bought some of their glop, or until you explained to them, as I had to do over and over again, their glop was toxic to my wife. Then they'd shoot a dirty look at me and let us go on past. And it got so bad, people would avoid those areas of the mall where the kiosks were. And that harmed the businesses that had the misfortune of being where those kiosks were. As it turns out, the person operating these kiosks was doing it illegally. The Israelis who were at these Dead Sea kiosks did not have the paperwork to be working in the United States of America. And one of the guys who owned these kiosks for the Dead Sea products was just sentenced to 6.5 years in jail for illegally employing Israeli nationals to sell these Dead Sea products. Trump is right. We need to control our borders. If you're going to have a kiosk with a product in a shopping mall, you give those jobs to legal American citizens. You don't just bring people here from the other country and give them jobs and possibly cover for intelligence operations, because there was an earlier scandal involving the Zoom-copter kiosks, and it turned out a lot of the Israelis who were arrested as part of the spy ring about the same time as 9/11, their cover job was they were working, if they weren't working at the moving companies, they were working at those Zoom-copter kiosks. Let's take a phone call. Jim in Vancouver, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Voter fraud, in particular, as Harris has interviewed on InfoWars today, and put it up to you several times, 11 minutes just now. She says there's a very easy way we can apply it before the election that will make the black box voting totally verifiable, transparent record. And I think that you should get her on your show. I'm sure she would come.
She's been on the show before, and I'll try and grab her. And we have been talking about this interview that she did on InfoWars, and kudos to Alex Jones for taking the lead on this.
You bet. All of us are taking the lead everywhere. It's amazing. I'm fighting this thing tooth and nail from every quarter I can, and I really appreciate you taking the calls. I'm not listening to you right now. I've had business all day long. I just remembered that I wanted to call you.
Well, I'm glad you called while the lines were open here, because more and more these days we have to limit the calls coming in.
Right. Did you also see that the interview with Larry Nichols yesterday, Sunday evening, saying how he said the FBI investigation is a red herring? The real thing is the WikiLeaks. Pay attention, promote it, ignore the other. It'll take care of itself.
Well, I'm coming from a point of view of politics being perception. And a lot of Americans are still not going through the WikiLeaks revelations. We're certainly going to feature them as they come on up. But the American people are looking at this announcement by the FBI as signaling that, yes, there is still some kind of a major cover-up in this issue. If they think announcing the reopening of the email investigation is going to help Hillary Clinton, I think they've seriously miscalculated. I think it's
yeah. Okay, Mike. Larry Nichols says that those records that will be released to the public have been purged, and they will find nothing about Hillary that is exculpatory, and that's going to reverse on us.
They're going to find nothing about Hillary that's exculpatory. I don't think that's the word that you're looking for. But I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. But we're still going to keep our eye on the WikiLeaks leaks and the DNC email leaks and the anonymous leaks, and apparently there's an FBI insider who's now leaking information. It's turned into a sieve. Well, Larry Nichols has done a lot. Hang on a second. Larry Nichols has done a lot of good work, but we can all make mistakes at certain times. At this point, I'm evaluating all of this in terms of the psychological impression it's going to make on the voters, who are going to be looking at the headlines and not necessarily looking at the dirt inside. The WikiLeaks stuff is important, and we're going to keep focusing on it. But anybody who thinks that this FBI reopening of the investigation a week ahead of the election is going to help Hillary, I think they've miscalculated seriously. For one thing, they can't go through all 650,000 emails in the next week. They just can't.
One thing, Mike. Last thing, Dr. Steve Pachenik, you know who he is, right?
Yes, I think I remember.
He's the old Clancy writer.
Right.
Novels and all that.
Yeah.
He was involved in all those administrations and so forth. He's putting out some really good information on his FBI deal, too. I put it up to you. It's in emails. I know you probably get 1,000, but I'm gone.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. Yeah, I get about 400 or 500 emails a day, and I try and read as many as I can, but sometimes I just cannot get to them all. All righty. Let's see. We're going to get back here to the news. Tony Blair is out there pushing the idea that they should throw out the last Brexit vote and have another one all over again, so that this time the vote riggers can really steal the election and declare that that's the will of the people. And he was out there on BBC4, and I don't think a lot of people are listening to him. We know the Remain people tried to steal that election. They failed. I don't know. Is that going to set the pattern here? If Donald Trump wins next week's election, they're going to come back and say, oh, well, let's throw that one out and let's have another election and give Hillary's vote stealers another chance to get it right. I don't think so. Now then, over at the Infernal Revenue Service, apparently they spent $12 million in taxpayer funds on their own private email system that turned out to be completely and utterly unusable. And even worse, the IRS violated federal regulations and even its own appropriations rules in handing out that $12 million contract. Now, that's a complete waste of money. I understand Hillary has a used email system for sale cheap right now. As you know, it is Halloween, and we are getting ready for the annual extortion racket. Tufts University literally sent out a warning that people should be very careful that they are not wearing offensive costumes. What is offensive is, of course, not defined. It's in the eye of whoever's standing around you. You could put a sheet on over your head to be a ghost, and somebody would say, it's a Klansman, I'm offended, I'm offended, I'm offended. Go ahead, be offended. Nothing happens. Do you realize how poorly college is preparing kids to enter the real world? When you enter the real world, you're not protected from offense. There's no such thing as a safe space in the corporate work world. You have to compete against people. You have to have differing opinions. Our current colleges are turning young Americans into a bunch of wimps who will not be able to compete, not just in the American workplace, but in the global marketplace as well. And by the way, if you're a parent, be very, very careful about what you're putting on your kid's face. Apparently there's been a study, this is reported in RIMF.com, where a lot of that cheap Halloween makeup to make your kid look like a monster has a lot of toxic heavy metals. And they may be thinking it's only once a year, who cares? You should care. So don't put that makeup on your kid's face. Just buy him a Donald Trump mask. By the way, I saw a wonderful show on National Geographic Channel the other day about the first emperor of China, Emperor Qin, and the discoveries they're making about this amazing tomb that he built for himself. And apparently what they've discovered as he got on in life and he wanted to live forever, his doctors recommended mercury to give him eternal life. And so he spent the last couple of his years breathing mercury vapor. We all know what that really does. And it drove him insane and basically led to his downfall and a coup for power by his youngest son. So it's a very, very good show. But, yeah, you've got to be careful. There's no safe level of exposure for these materials. And again, how reckless. We have a government that lets companies put this stuff out to paint all over your kid's face. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently over on MSNBC, and I guess there's, 5 or 6 people watching that over there. Apparently James Carville, who is billed as a Democratic strategist, he's definitely one of the Clinton cronies, he basically had a meltdown and just frothing at the mouth, saying that the FBI, the Republican Party, and the KGB are all teamed up together against Hillary Clinton. She's such a poor, innocent little child, and everybody's out together. It's the vast right-wing conspiracy, and it's Vladimir Putin, and he's got a Death Star, and he's going to kill poor Hillary Clinton. And you can smell the panic. You can smell the panic out there. And unfortunately, do not expect any of these people to capitulate until after the votes are counted next week. It's going to be a rough week, and every day that goes by, the hysteria is going to ramp up heavier and heavier. The attacks on my server are going to get more and more intense. You can just smell the panic coming on out. We have an entire political establishment, including the corporate media, has bet their entire existence on being able to convince the American people that they should want Hillary Clinton and not Donald Trump. And if Trump and the American people are able to overcome that election fraud, a lot of people are going to see an end to their careers, an end to their reputation, an end to their influence. A lot of people are going to be looking at jail time. We might actually save this nation from a collapse if we can get past this last battle with the establishment. And you all have to be involved, whether it's poll watching, going on out, talking to people. If you're sitting on your rear end and saying, I'm just an observer, then you are part of the problem. You are exactly where Hillary Clinton wants you to be. Now then, remember that Malheur Wildlife Refuge and the whole occupation thing, and oh my goodness, they're conspiracy and firearms and all these other evil people. The jury found them not guilty on all charges. And there's something you need to understand about the jury. If you serve on a jury, you're treated as if you're an office decoration by the judge and the prosecutor. But the reality is, you as a jury are the highest authority in that courtroom. You have the authority to ignore the law if you think it's wrongly applied or if you think the law itself is bad. That's why we have juries. Judges can be corrupt. Prosecutors can be ambitious. They can be serving an unknown, unseen political agenda. In this case, protecting the Uranium One deal. Because this Malheur Wildlife Refuge was right at the heart of this land grab, of trying to steal this huge chunk of land away from its rightful owners, not buy it from them, because they didn't want to sell, but just literally steal it, then turn around and lease it to this joint Canadian-Russian uranium mining company that just happened to make a whole bunch of huge donations to the Hillary Clinton Charitable Foundation, which doesn't really do that much charity. Now, apparently the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters are understanding why there is a link between all of this Clinton corruption and the bad things happening to their homes, and they've decided to occupy the local Hillary Clinton campaign headquarters. And they're demanding Hillary take a stand on this issue. Where do you stand on the pipeline? So far, Hillary isn't saying anything. She's trying to play both sides. So far, the police have arrested over 140 people in this crackdown on the North Dakota oil pipeline protesters. They have a right to protest. The police are justifying it, saying they're on private property, except that the private property was made private through eminent domain, a possible misapplication of it. There are restrictions on what eminent domain is supposed to be used for. Eminent domain is where the government says we need to build a public work, a road, a canal, and we're going to have to take your land for it, and we will compensate you for it. Eminent domain recently has been used to take land to turn over to developers for shopping centers, on the theory they'll produce more tax revenue than the people living on the land right now. And that seems to have been the case here. Meanwhile, the guards for the North Dakota pipeline are still open to charges of using dogs on the protesters. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're hearing now from the FBI that with an eye toward getting everything settled by the election, that they've decided it might be simpler and easier to release a list of the crimes that Hillary Clinton has not committed, and they figure that'll fit on a Post-it note. Meanwhile, somebody just sent me a cartoon that Anthony Weiner has just committed suicide by shooting himself 50 times in the back. All righty, getting on back to the serious news here. The city of Santa Ana is going to pay $100,000. Actually, let's be honest, it's the taxpayers of Santa Ana are going to pay $100,000 to settle a lawsuit regarding police harassment during a raid on a legal marijuana dispensary. And this has to do with the Sky High Holistic. And the city, as part of the settlement, is dropping all misdemeanor charges against the operators of the clinic. So, they're starting to do that. Now then, it is snowing up in Massachusetts here on Halloween. Now, I grew up in New England, and every year it was always the discussion was always, will we have snow by Thanksgiving? And some years we did, and some years we didn't. Snow on Halloween, that just never happened. It just didn't. We were still in autumn. The leaves were still turning, and, Thanksgiving, that's when the snow shows up, and we get the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Although, with Macy's current economic realities, I think this year's Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is going to be a kid with one balloon and a kazoo, and that's going to be about it. But forecasters are saying that there's going to be more snow in southern New England. And it's a reminder, safe driving tip number 37, that if trapped in global warming, insert Al Gore under the traction wheels to get on out of the snowdrift. Now, over in Great Britain, the Met Office, probably not wanting to repeat the 2009 embarrassment where they predicted a snow-free winter and got hammered, they're now predicting there's the coldest snap in 5 years and snow somewhere in the British Islands for the next 120 days. And they're talking about a major Arctic freeze, and they're bringing back the polar vortex like that's something new. That's how they're trying to get away from this idea that after a decade of promising us that human activity was warming the planet, that we're getting yet another harsh winter, just as the original Farmer's Almanac predicted. Oh, it's the polar vortex. There's always a polar vortex. It's called Coriolis effect. And there's one down near the South Pole as well. It's what makes that ocean around Antarctica so rough. There's nothing to get in the way of those waves getting kicked up. Now, over at the Daily Caller, they're talking about this Russian astrophysicist who is saying that the next little ice age is already here. That the last few years of ever harder winters is the beginning of it. As solar output declines, that's the inevitable result. They talk about the Maunder minimum. The Maunder minimum was observed by an astronomer named Maunder, coincident with the little ice age that hit Europe and the early United States. Now, everybody who went to science class in school knows there's an 11-year sunspot cycle. There's a 22-year magnetic cycle. There are now indications, because we've only really been able to study the sun scientifically for a little over 100 years, there are indications of longer cycles. And there are now 3 additional cycles that are theorized, all of them due to overlap on the low end of the cycle over the next few years. And we're going to see more and more of these. And by the way, the carbon Nazis are already out there trying to once again sell this idea that human-caused global warming is what brings cold, hard winters, which is not what they were saying back in 2000, when they were saying snowfalls are now a thing of the past. But remember, in the minds of the global warming cult, the real world, science, is subordinate to political agenda. If the political agenda says we're going to have a warmer world, then that world will be warmer, even if we have to hold our Bic lighters underneath those thermometers. And if snow shows up, well, then we just have to change the explanation. We can't have people going on out looking at the snow and saying, wow, it's cold out here. They'll stop trusting and believing the corporate media and the bought and paid for scientists. And they'll stop believing the politicians. And then that will be the end of political civilization, which, as I said, was not such a bad thing in Spain or Belgium. But they're still trying to keep this hoax going. Now, at this point, we know that Obama wants to hit everybody with a carbon tax once the election is come and gone. We know that everybody else who got caught up in this global warming hysteria is trying to salvage their reputation. National Geographic is launching a whole new show. They're going the star celebrity route. You know, forget about real scientists. We've got Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's out there telling you that we're in trouble unless you pay a carbon tax and do what we tell you. I'm sorry, Leonardo DiCaprio is an actor. He's not a scientist. I don't think he's ever even played a scientist in any of his TV shows or movies. But when they go to the star power, when the bought and paid for scientists can't convince you, and they go to the star power, we're going to have Leonardo DiCaprio, you know they're struggling to hang on to their credibility on that one. Now, over at the National Health Service in Great Britain, they've been hit by computer malware that has forced them to shut down all of its IT systems. They got compromised by some kind of a virus on Sunday, and they're calling it a major incident. And right now, medical appointments to see a doctor or a practitioner, get any kind of help, are on hold. They literally cannot offer medical services because they can't get to the computerized medical records of patients. These black hat malware authors, hackers, whatever you want to call them, are now threatening human life, and still the government will not do anything about it. Because after all, if you're being forced to buy computer security software, even if it doesn't work and you're still buying it, that stimulates the economy, and anything that stimulates the economy is good. Let's go on out and start some epidemics. That's good for the economy. They'll be forced to buy medicines. Let's design products that destroy themselves after 5 years. It's good for the economy. It's amazing. Now then, story coming out of the New American, no less. As media credibility dies, Obama announces a war on the free press. And he's walking a very fine line here because he's talking about what he calls a curating function. No, it's not censorship. It's not government censorship. We're not censoring anything. But there has to be a curating function that will discard unapproved information. I'm sorry, but when you have a system that blocks information not approved by the government, that is censorship. But that's how scared they are of the fact that people around the world are waking up to what's going on. Zbigniew Brzezinski called it the grand global political awakening. Of course, from his point of view, that's a bad thing. They want you to go back to being asleep. They want you to just believe as you're told to believe, because you're much more useful to them if you do that. If you just do as you're told and believe as you're told, then you're very useful to them. You're like the little robots that run around Westworld. You're just there to be used and played with by the world's elite. You start waking up and realizing that it's all a scam, well, gee, we might have to shut down the amusement park. It's one of the reasons I really love that show. Westworld has turned me into something I didn't think I was capable of being at my advanced age. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the show. I want the stickers and the T-shirts and the hats and everything. And one of the things about the new Westworld, as long as we're going to talk about it, in many ways it has brought back the age of the original 1960s Star Trek. Now, if you look at Star Trek, and believe it or not, BBC is rerunning in high def those original Star Trek episodes, and it looks simplistic and silly and the rest of it, but you need to understand the culture in which that show happened. Star Trek actually made people think about what was going on. Star Trek got very high Nielsen ratings and very low Burke scores. Now, everyone knows what the Nielsen ratings are. That's the ratings of how many people are watching a TV show. Fewer people outside the advertising industry know about the Burke scores. The Burke scores are how many people watching a TV show are watching and paying attention to the TV commercials. And networks tend to pay a lot more attention to those Burke scores. And the reason Star Trek was canceled after just 3 years, actually they wanted to cancel it after the first year, is because the stories made people think, and they'd start talking during the commercial breaks about what they were seeing and what was going on. And that was what made it a loser in the eyes of NBC, and a winner in the syndication markets ever since. And Westworld is like that. Now, fortunately, Westworld doesn't have to worry about Burke scores. They're on HBO. There are no commercials. But it really is a wonderful show. I think it's HBO's new flagship hit. It's their new Game of Thrones, and I absolutely love the show. And if you're just now coming on board, this is classic J.J. Abrams. You have to pay attention every single minute. This is not a show to put on when you're distracted watching the kids or the dogs, or you're eating pretzels and drinking beers. It's work to watch this show, and it's worth it. And if you have not seen it, don't come in the middle. Go on back to the on-demand. Watch it from the very beginning. And even now, going back and watching those earlier episodes, I'm picking up things I missed the first time. It's a wonderful show. It's a reminder of what TV can be when somebody decides, let's do something good, rather than let's throw together some schlock and hope people tune into the thing. And yes, I'm a big, big fan of it. And I think, like the Matrix movies, it is a metaphor for our current life. And I think if you watch it, you will come to understand that. Not exactly a show for the little kids. A lot of nudity, a lot of sex, a lot of violence, but definitely a show for the adults in the room. Okay, now then, over at the CDC, this gets into the issue of gun rights. As you know, one of the big talking points of the gun grabbers is accidental gun deaths. Oh, all these people, they died from self-inflicted gun wounds, and they fail to mention most of them are suicides. And if you take away the guns, they'll find some other way to commit suicide, like leaping off a tall building and hitting a banker on the way to the ground. It turns out the CDC, in compiling their database for 2014, suffered a computer programming error. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. And gun scholar John Lott discovered that because of this coding error, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, the CDC failed to report that accidental gun deaths hit a record low in 2014. They don't want you thinking about that. By the way, apparently at a Pizza Hut, they had an incident where after the Pizza Hut had closed, 3 criminals tried to break in. One of the Pizza Hut employees, using his own firearm, drove the criminals off and shot and killed one of them. For some reason, Pizza Hut put this guy on suspension. I hope they'll have the good sense to bring him back, because he did right. And I'm going to order a pizza from Pizza Hut tonight just to show them that I approve of this is how you deal with criminals. As opposed to President Obama, who's issued pardons for all kinds of cocaine smugglers and actually destroyed our relationship with the Philippines by chastising the Philippines for wanting to shoot drug dealers. Johnson & Johnson in hot water yet again over their baby powder, and having to do with the fact that they use talcum, which, as it turns out, is carcinogenic. But it was cheap. We made money on it. Don't you understand? We're in business to make money. We're not actually in business to take care of you. What's wrong with you people? But they've been hit with another multi-million-dollar lawsuit as the courts continue to find Johnson & Johnson did not warn people about the dangers of talcum, of constant exposure to talcum. Some of these corporations are doing some incredibly stupid and reckless things. They're spraying glyphosate on cotton that's being used for women's products in very sensitive parts of their anatomy. And glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen. But that's okay. It'll stimulate the economy. These women will have to go to the cancer treatment place, and they'll have to have chemotherapy and radiation. It's all good if we can force them to spend more money. Let's go on out and cut off their feet, and they'll have to buy prosthetics. That's good for the economy. Let's cut the brake lines on their cars. They'll have to buy new cars or go to the funeral homes. That's good for the economy. Interesting little study. 2 leading U.S. Geological Survey scientists in Pasadena, and it's about to be published in the Bulletin for the Seismological Society of America, have attributed Southern California's deadliest earthquake to oil drilling. This is the 1933 Long Beach earthquake. And now they're saying that 2 other earthquakes, the magnitude 5 in 1920 in Inglewood and the 1929 in Whittier, may be linked to oil drilling as well. It's not just the fracking industry that's been doing this. It's been happening all along. We're going to start a phone call with Tim in Wyoming. I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind? Tim, are you there? Oh, Tim in Wyoming.
Hello.
There you are. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
I had you muted, yeah. I wanted to mention, you were talking about shows that make you think, and I wanted to mention a show that was on for a little bit. It was called Forever. And I don't know if you ever saw that, but
I
it was
missed that
Ian Griffin. You missed that show?
I missed that show, sorry. I actually don't watch a lot of TV, but, you know, when Westworld came out, because of my association with Michael Crichton, I felt I had to tune in, and it was definitely worth it. Tim, stay on the line. We got to take 3 minutes of commercials. I'll be right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Tim in Wyoming, and you were talking about stuff on TV.
Well, yeah, basically, I was talking about the show. You say you don't watch a lot of television these days, but I mean, I think that Star Trek was a groundbreaking show. Like you say, they had people thinking. They had people thinking about subjects. It was a socially conscious show, and that was the thing that I found about the show Forever, because Ian Griffith and I think that's how you pronounce his first name, but also I can't remember his co-star's name, but the two of them had a good interplay where he plays a character who's existed or lived for a little bit over 200 years because of some sort of I don't know, magical thing happened to him. It wasn't really magic, but anyway, he's lived for a long time, and he's seen a lot of different things happening. When he started mentioning
that was actually an episode out of the original Star Trek, where they found this human who, because of genetics, had lived forever, and he'd been Mozart, and he'd been Bach, and he'd been all these other people here.
Right.
To get back to the current situation, somebody just actually sent me an article from Slate, where they're out there saying why Westworld is the new Lost. And I know a lot about Lost. I worked on Lost. I take a great deal of pride in the fact I worked on Lost. I'm sorry, with all due apologies to Slate, Westworld is so far beyond Lost. They're not even the same time zone as far as I'm concerned.
I never, I think I actually saw about one, sorry to say, I only saw about one half of one episode of the show Lost, unfortunately, but I heard it was really good.
It was, especially the first 2 seasons, and then it kind of got into a little bit of trouble, which we don't have time to analyze what happened to Lost. But from where I'm sitting, from my background in film and writing and everything, this is much better thought out. The story cycle is clearly got a much stronger pattern to it. I can't wait to see next week's episode. I'm hooked. I'm a fan. I'm a kid all over again. I want to send in the cereal box tops and get my official Westworld Sheriff's badge.
Or your magic decoder ring or some kind of thing.
Well, I have one of those around here from Captain Midnight. I think it's down on the shelf downstairs. I'm in the middle of donating a bunch of stuff to the Smithsonian. I had to send them that Captain Midnight ring as well.
You're donating stuff to the Smithsonian, really? I'm surprised that. There are probably a lot of people that do the same thing, but you actually have things that they're going to take. As far as television history and that type of thing.
Well, it's a bunch of different stuff. At the moment, it's political buttons, and at my age, you stop looking to acquire things and you start looking for reasons to give them away. First to family, younger members of the family, and if they're not interested, find museums and stuff. Because of my near miss with the grave a few years ago, I figure if I don't give the stuff away, it could wind up in a landfill, and that would be a real crime against history itself. So, yeah, I'm in the process of thinning out the various collections and whatnot to deserving museums. Anyway, Tim, got to let you go. There's the music. I got to go to Jim Goddard's show in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on Republic Broadcasting. You are all part of the independent media. You are now all officially Rivero's Rangers poll watchers. And they're going to try and steal this, and we're going to have to work together to overcome the election fraud and try and save this country. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.